Back at it with a recap and discussion of Season 2, Episode 6 of Power Book 3, Raising Kanan. It's a Businessman. The show opens with RAQ and crew meeting up at the venue where Lou and Crown hosted the showcase in the first season. And so she's meeting with the crew guys, letting them know, giving them more info about the plans for moving forward with Jersey, that they're not going to roll over for the Italians. Things are kind of at a standstill, sort of where they were before. And Lou still doesn't want to be involved, or at least is apprehensive about her idea of this push into Jersey, right? Which is really a testing ground for further expansion. She wants to go national. In the midst of this, she states that Kanan's going to be coming into the business. She wants him to be fully immersed into everything. She wants him to see everything, learn everything from the ground up. So you can think of this goes back to her looking at him as like the heir to her throne. She wants him to learn about her dominion, understand how things work. And so as the conversation ends, Worrell calls RAQ away to have a private side conversation. And I'm still undecided about him. Like last episode, or the previous episode to that, I think it was, he linked up with Unique outside the bodega. They're chit-chatting and whatnot. The bus was robbed. It's kind of unclear where exactly his loyalty lies, because he could be saying one thing to RAQ, lying to her, but then seeing him have interactions with Unique, it's a little bit unclear. I was under the assumption at first that he had completely switched over from Unique, this after distrusting him. But then with the back and forth of the last episodes, where RAQ's drugs were stolen, I feel like maybe he might be playing both sides, or at least he's working for Unique, right? Things are still a little bit unclear. Part of the issue is that with RAQ bringing him into the fold, he specifies him and Unique have history together. They ran together for years, and he admits to her that he hasn't completely cut those ties. He's still in contact with Unique. Given their past history, I don't understand how that would make you uncomfortable. You have this person within your organization whose loyalties you have to constantly question. It seems like it would be a tough situation to be in right now, very uncomfortable. Leaving the venue, RAQ takes Kanan with her. He's riding shotgun. They step out of the club, and she explains to him using what I would deem vulgar language to be coming from your mom. I'm kind of surprised in the way that she speaks to him. I'm surprised that she uses profanity speaking to him on a whole, right? Regardless of how you speak to whoever else, this is her child, right? The conversation is a little bit inappropriate, or the terminology used. But the quote that she uses actually comes from her church-going mom. And she explains that, which I think we got some insight into in the first season, that her mom might be this church-going woman, but sounds like she might be a pretty tough customer. And given the life that RAQ and her siblings had, the stuff that her dad was into, I thought maybe the mom might have gotten into church and whatnot later on in life, but was kind of wild in her youth. Yet it sounds like she might have been living both lives at the same time. RAQ specifies after using this vulgar quote that she attributes to her mom, Kanan's caught off guard by it. And it's yeah, your grandma talks like that. Don't let that church business fool you. Your grandma was a wild girl in her day, and she sounds like she might be still a little bit now. So RAQ and the crew leave the meeting with the rest of the crew, and they go to the tailor shop to meet up with Unique. Worrell has let it drop that Unique has ties, or rather dealings with the crew out in Jersey that she's having problems with, and suggests that we as the audience are aware of this, but RAQ isn't at this point, right? RAQ doesn't know that Unique is actually the one that's been passing on information about her shipments out to Jersey, right? And so not having the full scope of the situation, she takes Worrell's advice, goes to speak with Unique, as at this point she looks at it as that Unique owes her and he owes the Italian. So basically it's like a favor for a favor. RAQ believes that Unique might be able to help kind of smooth things over with the Italians, bridge the gap. He plays coy at first, but we as the audience know this is a ploy, right? This is all planned to put RAQ in a position of having to come to him, which then leaves, when they leave, Marvin kind of questions RAQ, I hope you're not putting your full trust in Unique, which RAQ states that she really isn't. And she also doesn't trust Worrell either. But it's kind of like a necessary evil that needs to be dealt with, right? Her logic has been to separate Unique from his people, to separate Unique from his crew so that he couldn't come out of prison and immediately become a problem for her, at least not on the scale that he was before. He's going to have to take some time to rebuild himself. But at the same time, it's There's so many question marks, and if that's the case, why bother? If you want to expand, why does it have to be into Jersey, especially once you realize there's some established parties who are going to give you grief? So RAQ and her brothers, they meet up with Unique and the Italians. They effectively broker a deal. So along the lines of what was on the table before, where pretty much RAQ is going to have to, she'll get permission to sell in Jersey without getting any static from the Italians, right? And in exchange, she's going to give them a percentage. The boss offers that in good faith, sort of as a compromise. He's going to drop the percentage that he's requesting by a few points. But one of his requirements is that Unique has to be like the head of the Jersey operation. He wants someone that he can trust. At this point, they've been dealing with Unique. He knows him more than he knows RAQ. And so RAQ rightly picks up on it that obviously at this point, Worrell and Unique have backed her into a corner and she fell for the trap. She brought Worrell into her business in an effort to push Unique out of the market in Queens, only to have him now in the position of potentially running one of the branches of her business. Instead of having his own crew, Unique is now using the drugs she gets from her connect and her crew. Unique pretty much used RAQ's greed and ambition to get her to give him all the things she tried to take away from him in Queens. Only difference is now he seemingly has the protection of the Italians. I knew from the beginning that because Unique wasn't completely gone from the show, that he was going to continue to be a problem for RAQ. All of that risk, effort, and energy that she put in the first season was for a fair victory. She might have won the battle in the first season or even the war of the first season. But now in this engagement, once again, she's kind of taken L's along the way. And it remains to be seen how things work out in the long run, right? We saw in the first season she kind of turned things around, but long run it didn't really work out for her. So next RAQ is hanging with Cartier at his gallery, where apparently he's purchased a new piece. But this is the thing I don't like about him. He seems smarmy, right? That's the word I'm using. I'm going to stick with it. I don't like this guy. He's like your typical drug dealer character with a bit of money. He smacks one of the employees because he asks for help loading an art piece into the car. RAQ can be a little bit reckless with her mouth and will personally kill if needed. But aside from Kanan and Marvin, we've never seen her put her hands on anyone. She's never slapped up anyone. Part of it might be that she's a woman. Most of the people she deals with are men, so she can't just slap them around. RAQ doesn't say anything, but I feel like Cartier slapping the guy was pretty much about ego, letting the guy know that he's in charge here, but also trying to impress RAQ. Really, he's a jerk. He explains a little bit more about his business as far as how he launders his money, but he also explains that he doesn't operate in New York City, so largely because there's a lot of competition, which results in lower margins. Instead, he looks a bit further south to smaller markets where they don't have easy access to drugs. He has a vertically integrated business model where he controls all the areas of product, right? Distribution, everything. And this allows him to maximize his profits. So think of it in New York, where RAQ and Unique last season were battling over what were really just a few blocks in Queens. So imagine that's one area of Queens. Queens is pretty big. Think about the borough, and then think about that you have 4 other boroughs. Her crew at Baisley are making far more money than she was making with her operation before. But imagine if she were then to take that and take it to a market where there's even less competition, and she could name her price. Right? She could be wholesale. She could be retail. Consider the first season when RAQ was dating Symphony, right? She took some of his ideas about urban planning and adapted them for her business. We saw Kanan use some of his gems as well. We haven't really seen RAQ put any of Cartier's ideas into play, but they're brewing. RAQ mentioned last season on her first date with Symphony that she likes guys that know more and have a bigger vision than she does. She dibble-dabbled a little bit while playing Bear to Death Con and being coerced by Howard. Getting hooked up with High Post really introduced her to selling drugs. I don't get the sense that RAQ is romantically interested in Cartier, right? Because while he tries to get personal, she keeps bringing the focus back to business, brushing stuff off. I think she's trying to get whatever information she can from him about how to better make and manage her money. But yes, I don't like this guy as he tries too hard to present an image to RAQ. He's like a used car salesman, just very untrustworthy. In keeping with RAQ's deal with the Italians, RAQ has to replace her guy in Jersey with Unique. She extends an offer for him to take what's effectively a demotion, but he instead decides to leave completely. The guy that RAQ had running stuff out in Jersey is pretty much moved aside for Unique. This just seems like a terrible idea. So there's still this tension between RAQ and Unique, and I just see more problems there. This thing is going to go all kinds of sideways, especially because she now has her enemy looking over her dominion. Kanan. Probably for one of the first times, Kanan and Lou are momentarily alone together at the venue. Lou kind of briefly speaks to Kanan and asks him oh, so you're a part of this now, this is what you do. But we see Lou is moving beyond or trying to move beyond this family business. He's trying to do his own thing. And as he explains to Kanan, this is what she does, as in this is what RAQ does. This doesn't necessarily have to be what we all have to do, right? We certainly know this is what Kanan has to do. He has other options. This is RAQ's vision, but it doesn't have to be everyone else's. So seemingly Lou was really the only one remaining out of the three Thomas kids that's actively pushing the next generation to aspire towards a different life, right? To not become a part of this business. RAQ was last season, but now we see she's not pushing Jukebox towards anything, but with Kanan, she's accepted him into the fold. She's sort of now lined up with Marvin, or at least with what was Marvin's perspective last season. It's kind of difficult it's not clear where he stands now. Kanan is pretty much starting from the bottom, so he's like an errand boy. His job at this point is to take a brown bag of money from Baisley to the stash house, which is at the bodega. He and Famous are walking. They just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, which I find a little bit convenient, right? The neighborhood stick-up kid pulls up. It's a guy named Freddie. Famous is wearing a little rope chain, and Kanan is carrying a backpack in which he's placed the bag of money he's supposed to be transporting. We haven't seen him in school since last season, very early on, but he's still supposed to be a student at this point. What's the odds that he'd have anything of value in the backpack? So it's quite the coincidence. Now, I do know that people used to get robbed and some unfortunately lost their lives over JanSports and strings when they first came out. But you're from the neighborhood and robbing RAQ's son? Why wouldn't you ask him for his wallet or the chain that he usually wears? So, hoping to get back RAQ's money, Kanan and Famous are at Famous's apartment looking for some kind of weapon. The place is a mess and there's not even a knife in the place. Kanan surmises that the neighbor girl from the party and her mom might have a knife. So they go over, the daughter's hesitant to give him the knife, she's asking a lot of questions. Their dynamic and interaction with Kanan strikes me as weird, the mom especially. She seems inappropriately interested in Kanan, and so Pedo Mom does more than give him a knife. She goes ahead and gives him a gun. Pedo Mom hasn't said anything really out the way to Kanan, but the way that she looks at him, touches him, seems kind of off because he's a teen, she's a grown woman, right? She has a daughter Kanan's age, and she's given dirty old woman vibes. So Kanan and Famous, they know Freddie as they're all from the same neighborhood. This is the thing about doing dirt where you live. People generally will know where to find you. Kanan and Famous bum rush one of the guys as he enters their hangout spot or apartment or whatever. Take back the items they'd stolen. The money's untouched, as when they opened the bag, they quickly figured out whose money it likely was and explained that they planned to give it back. Famous, they quickly give up the chain, but knowing whose child Kanan is, why would you even rob him to begin with? That seems like Freddie was trying to make a statement and make a name for himself, but got more than he bargained for. So they give back everything. There's no real incident, but things still look bad for Kanan because this was his first day and he got tried by stick-up kids. The worker at Baisley who gave him the bag called him the paper bag guy, right? Talked down to him. Going back to Scrappy, he implied that Kanan was given his position through nepotism. In some ways, he skipped the line, right? He has no rep and is actually in the negative because it's looked at as he's his mother's boy and that's why he's out here. People don't really have much respect for him. He's feeling a little bit insecure and as though people are testing him. It goes back to the show's very first episode where Kanan's name ringing out when he beat up the kids at the playground after they jumped him. It wasn't enough for him to stand up for himself. He had to do it in such a way as to make it that no one else was going to mess with him. To make a name for himself, as in Kanan doesn't play. He's not someone that you want problems with. In keeping with that, he gun butts, kicks, and then beats Freddie, right? Punches him all up in the head, pretty much knocking him out. Even Famous stands by, he's kind of caught off guard by this, but he finally regains his composure enough to grab Kanan and get them both out of there. We've seen little moments, like little hints along the way, but this is the first time you really see Kanan get violent with someone. He had like his little tiff with Scrappy last season, but that wasn't much of anything, and actually Scrappy was getting the better of him in that fight. You're starting to see here where he's trying to make a name for himself and trying to live up to this reputation of who his mother and father are. There's this ongoing thing about identity and reputation, who people are at home versus who they are out in the street. And not only does he have the identity and rep of RAQ to live up to, and people questioning him because of that, like, he's his mama's boy, but also him being DEF CON's kid, there are these expectations for him. It's almost like this thing of like perpetrating a fraud, because he's most certainly not DEF CON's child, though he certainly is RAQ's son. As a lot of people have pointed out, this isn't the life of Kanan. He can be a nice kid who grows up to be a well-adjusted adult, but he needs to be pushed in that direction. Pushing him in this direction is unnatural for him, and he's going to go completely overboard to prove himself, because this is not who he naturally is. And I think it's much the same for RAQ as well. RAQ was not DEF CON's girlfriend or child mother or anything like that. And even with people believing that she's like constantly being questioned and tested, she does things to kind of instill fear or respect in people and goes overboard by being willing to do more and go further than everyone else. We see that within Kanan as well. As Kanan and Famous are leaving Freddy's place, the cops roll up on them. They take off running. Kanan gets away while Famous trips, falls, in horror movie fashion, gets arrested. The Thomases. Marvin and RAQ are at RAQ's house, where she's mashing the hell out some potatoes that are going to be gummy. Usually, we never really see them have any personal conversations, right? But in this case, they briefly touch on the business before Marvin makes it a point to ask how things are going with her otherwise, right? Really inquiring about how things went between her and Kanan in the Catskills. She admits that Kanan kind of keeps things to himself. Their connection is weakened. She mentions getting the sense that he's having a conversation about her in his head that she gets no say in. He's trying to figure her and things out without actually talking to her about his misgivings. That's not really accurate though, right? He has come to her and made an honest attempt to talk things out, but he stopped because when he has taken the step to speak to her, she lies or tries to manipulate him, right? And he's now aware of this. She's had the opportunity to maintain or reopen those lines of communication, but communication has to be open and flow both ways. You can't keep things from him, or you can't lie to him and expect that he's going to continue to be forthcoming with you. He's becoming a young man and beginning to think and do for himself. He's not going to just blindly follow your lead. There's this thing between Kanan and RAQ, but then also Jukebox and Marvin. Their kids are getting older and they're not really able to control them anymore. They're figuring out their own identities and who they want to be. Both parents are fumbling their handling of this transition. RAQ certainly, but Marvin as well. He laments that things might not be great between RAQ and Kanan, but at least the two of them are still talking. Regardless of the awkwardness, there's still some communication. Whereas it's like Jukebox just refuses to speak to or have anything to do with him at all. She's effectively disowned him as her dad. RAQ keeps Juke's secrets and seems apprehensive about violating her trust, but she informs him that Kenya is back in town and Jukebox has reached out to her. She also uses the opportunity to voice her opinion on the situation between Marvin and Jukebox. She's really not happy about what happened between him and Jukebox. Their father never put his hands on RAQ like he did Juke. Right? She thought it was completely wrong for him and inappropriate for him to fight Jukebox like she was a man or some random stranger on the street rather than his daughter. RAQ has played a part in raising Jukebox and somewhat regards her as like a daughter, right? Thus she warns him that if anything like that ever happens again, she will kill him herself. I understood the sentiment, but also raised an eyebrow at her choice of words, and she has killed before. So I had some suspicions that they might have played a role in running Kenya off, but it sounds like she did indeed abandon Jukebox. The story that she told Jukebox was true, right? Like she did that on her own. So they've spent 16, 17 years raising this kid. And Marvin is not happy about Kenya showing up after so much of the heavy lifting of raising her has been completed. Marvin is upset, but RAQ points out to him that Jukebox went looking for her mother because she wasn't getting what she needed from him to fill the gap as her father. Kind of the same thing with Kanan and Howard, right? They're having this conversation, but it's cut short by Kanan running in the house to tell RAQ they need to go to the police station as Famous has been arrested. He leaves out some key details from like his explanation of what happened. Not knowing the full story, RAQ explains that Famous's family needs to handle that, right? Like, that's not her problem. It's unfortunate, but not her concern. With the arrival of Jukebox and Lou, the families assemble for dinner. No one else comments, but Marvin attempts to start a conversation with Juke by pointing out that he hasn't seen her in a dress in years. She's like wearing a dress, her hair is out. He makes other attempts as well, but like Juke just ignores him. Meanwhile, Kanan is trying to get his uncles to get RAQ to help him with Famous, but she continues to brush that aside. RAQ, being petty, takes issue with Lou requesting salt for the potatoes, right? So these dinners are a mess with all the tension. When you think of it, RAQ has been a mother figure to Jukebox, and Marvin has been a father figure to Kanan. Traditionally, RAQ has kept Jukebox's secrets and Marvin Kanan's. But this season, RAQ tells Marvin about Jukebox reaching out to Kenya, and Marvin refuses to help Kanan with Famous or retrieving RAQ's money if it means going behind her back. The two adults are now a united front, but the problem is that they're both deeply flawed people. Lou. During the visit to the tailor shop, something that Unique touched on was Lou missing his shot at Warrell last season and believing he did it on purpose. He's kind of sowing discontent by planting a little bug in everyone's ear that Lou isn't cut out for this business anymore. Not to say that he's soft, but rather that his heart isn't in it. Unique really touched on it, right? Like, he called it out. He was being messy, but certainly made a valid point. RAQ and Lou are alone in the kitchen after the family dinner, right? RAQ is washing dishes, and she broaches the topic of what Unique said about Lou, right? Missing his shot at Warrell as something that he did on purpose, right? She asks if there's any truth to that hypothesis. Lou doesn't really know, but states that he doesn't want to be a part of that stuff anymore, right? At least not killing anyone. The gun did indeed jam, but one has to ask, why did he pick a gun that RAQ later explained to Kanan was prone to jamming, unreliable? In trying to serve two masters, Lou isn't really doing a good job at either his legit or illegal business. Lou has other interests. I don't think this is a business anyone should be in, but for these intents and purposes, if you're going to be in this business, you kind of need to be all in or out. And at this point, if Lou is messing up, you're better off just letting him go instead of trying to force him into this thing. It's an incredibly dysfunctional relationship, right, that he has with Crown as well. And things have been going from a simmer to a boil. I would like to think that maybe RAQ was doing the nice thing as a sister and stepping aside so Lou can pursue something else in life, right? She could have also been giving him a heads up about his disloyal business partner as she tells him about, Crown approaching her. I was surprised that RAQ mentioned to Lou that Crown came to her with an offer to get Lou out of the record business, especially given that she promised Crown that it would never get back to Lou. He asked the question as to why she's telling him this. She explains that, maybe it's her mind telling her that the best thing to do is to let Lou go. It sounds like effectively she's giving him his release papers, which is the right thing to do, but after giving it further thought, I don't think RAQ told Lou about Crown's proposal out of the goodness of her heart. Instead, I think she was manipulating Lou, knowing that he would go crazy on Crown, right? He doesn't know enough about the business to run it on his own and will likely run back to her or maybe Cartier for help, which might allow RAQ to become involved with the label, thus providing a place for her to launder her money. I think that's where things are headed. But Lou still has problems in his other business, right, with Crown. He found out from Famous that Jessica was cheating on him with Crown. Now he finds out that Crown went behind his back to get RAQ to help push him out of the business. They had the run-in with the DJ last week. Crown pulled a gun on him. Crown told Jukebox that Lou gave Zisa her song. Just a bunch of passive-aggressive things. Yet, I don't think Lou is a good business partner to Crown either because he's a bully. The question is, where do they go from here? As expected, we've been building towards this showdown between Lou and Crown from last season. They end up putting things out in the open, discussing some of the wrongs that have been committed on both sides. Lou is a bit green, but Crown is overestimating his importance in Lou's eyes, right? Things escalate and has been happening like it progresses from words to becoming physical. If you think about it, Crown is in like a physically abusive relationship with Lou that has been getting worse and now culminates in his death. As Lou was strangling Crown, I couldn't help but think like, this is going to be one hell of a mess to clean up without anyone knowing. And then in walks Zisa, a potential witness who has a relationship with smarmy Cartier. What if she starts talking? Right? While he's fighting against it, we see that Lou's still got that killer in him, right? He hasn't done the work or learned coping mechanisms to move past that. He hasn't learned how to more productively express his anger. He should join Marvin and RAQ in those anger management classes. They're all dysfunctional. Jukebox. We see that Jukebox is out with her mom, right? Spending time shopping for clothes and whatnot. The scene opens, Jukebox is in a dress and her hair is down and whatnot instead of that tired French roll that she was wearing. But we see here that like she's trying on clothes. Her mom is encouraging her and whatnot, commenting on the outfits. And Kenya speaks about like the boots and jeans that she was wearing, that kind of stuff, right? That it's a welcome sight to see her out of those more masculine clothing and dressed like a young lady, right? As this is how a young lady should dress. I will say, I think whether Marvin willfully turned a blind eye to Jukebox's emerging sexual identity, he never really seemed to have a problem with her wearing jeans and boots, right? Pretty much dressing like a teenage boy. We see now that he's even starting to accept more like all of her, right? Like when we look at the room in the house, right? He doesn't seem to have a problem with her physical presentation, but Kenya does. And at this point, they haven't even really spent that much time together. And this is after years of being a non-presence in this girl's life. But here we see that already she's pushing her to change her style of dress. And I highly doubt that at this point she's aware Jukebox is a lesbian, right? This is kind of the thing looming in the background that I was kind of apprehensive about, right? That I had concerns about Jukebox meeting up with her mom, right? I think RAQ kind of touched on it as well. My feeling is that regardless of whatever Kenya's past might have been, that she might not be willing to accept Jukebox as she is. As we see, she's already trying to change her. She looks nice, right? In the new clothes. She doesn't look particularly happy. I don't know if I would go so far as to say she looks uncomfortable, but whereas Kenya is smiling, Jukebox's face does not convey the same feelings. These clothes are not her style. This is not her. This is not her identity. Rather, it's who her mom thinks she should be. And I think in the long run, that's going to be a problem. Marvin. So Marvin goes to his anger management class and there's a big change, right? I think the last episode, him meeting with the teacher one-on-one, having that session where he started to open up was a step in the right direction. Prior to that, him using the breathing exercise, when he got into it with the guy about the elevator, right? Taking a breath, calming things down, figuring out how to rectify the situation without things getting out of hand. It's like just these little things you see him adapting along the way, sort of like RAQ with Symphony, right? That brings us to this point where he's now in this session with the rest of the group and you see him standing there, right? He's not being forced, or it doesn't feel like he's hesitant about participating in the group. He doesn't give the full details about his business, but he uses this as an outlet to discuss what's going on in his life as a dealer, how he's adapting his language for the situation. And as he explained to the teacher, you know, he's trying to take the things that he's learning in the class and adapt them to his life. He's not always successful, but as she mentions, right, the fact that he's trying says a lot. Last season, Marvin was an idiot, right? But in comparison to most of the other characters, he's actually shown the most growth. And this is as a lot of the other characters are devolving, RAQ especially. Kanan is kind of starting off on this path down the wrong road, right? Marvin is showing some maturity. He's grown a tremendous amount since last season. I've enjoyed in the relatively short space of time seeing the transformation of this character. And it's like, while I've disliked the transformation of RAQ's character, I wasn't expecting this from Marvin. Howard. We see that Kanan is standing outside the precinct and Howard walks out with Famous and RAQ's bag of money, or the backpack containing RAQ's money. Unbeknownst to them, that like crackhead guy that pops up all the time and Burke both also arrive at the precinct at this time. The crackhead does a double take and recognizes Kanan, likely realizing that that's the guy he saw running from the park when Howard was shot. Burke has learned that Howard has a son that he hasn't told anyone about. And there Howard goes once again talking to Kanan. Howard rightly guessed that Kanan probably still has questions about his paternity. And so he hands Kanan a paper, which I'm assuming are the results of the DNA test as further proof of his paternity, which he like gave these papers to RAQ as well. Burke noticed from last season that Howard has taken an unnatural interest in this kid. RAQ is the dealer, but he's super focused on the kid. It would make more sense for him to be in her business, but why the interest in her son? What would they have to talk about, and why are you doing him or his friends favors? She continues to be a busybody as she checked his files earlier in the episode, and this is just going to make her dig even deeper. I'm sure she's going to end up eventually putting everything together. She's probably going to die too. Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and check out my Rolling with RAQ playlist. Go ahead and click that thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.